So this 20.61% return could have been yours if you had followed my financial advice over the month. But before we get into ifs, let's talk about how. Hey, welcome to the first month in review. As promised, we're going to be looking over all of my investment decisions over the past few weeks and seeing how that has worked overall in the month and how my portfolio has grown and what you would have gained had you let me manage your money or taken my advice. Without further ado, let's get into it. So breaking this down week by week, week 1 was the week of January 24th to the 28th of 2022. This week in particular, we actually added an extra day to because we saw massive percent increases for all of the stocks, and something that I personally would have done. Week 2 is the week of January 31st to February 6th, 2022. This one, you can see a few discrepancies in the labeling. So the first off, Taiwanese thingy was a very zoomer way of trying to say the Taiwanese Semiconductor Manufacturing Company Limited. So you're going to notice that we also did a second discrepancy for the sake of fairness here, where I mentioned that at the end of the week it was actually down. However, had you followed the instructions, which I had set out there, of buying before it announced its revenues, you would have seen that it had peaked at 126.23, which would have been a very healthy return that week. However, that was not exactly as I had said, so I wrote it down as a loss overall. The other thing you're going to see there is BuzzFeed. I had said buy BuzzFeed after it reached 3.99. I had said it's probably going to go up a little bit. It did, but depending on when you bought it and when you quote-unquote shorted it, you could have gotten a different result. I also said check in on it in a month, and it'll be a month as of next week, so I will follow up on that number. This year's week 3, which was February 14th to February 18th, 2022, this was our big cash week. We had a little bit of a loss on Pfizer. Bark had reached a great high. I wrote the average high down on this number, which is the high that I would have sold at. Evolution Petroleum's number is the number from its entire week. I personally sold it around 10%. However, I also said you could have held on to it if you wanted to, so we wrote it down as 14%. Peloton in this case was a huge discrepancy. Peloton had a wild week that week depending on when you bought it. The 9.68% number comes from if you had just bought it at the beginning of the week and sold at the very end of the week. However, this number could have easily fluctuated by 20 to 30% in the positive direction. Now for our final week, the week of February 14th to February 18th. This is our new updated text, so this is indicating that we have not yet covered all of the details of these stocks on the channel. There were a few big mistakes done this week, namely Facebook was bought at too early of a time, the Ukraine crisis became a little bit more real, but Latex Semiconductor is sold at the percentage which I sold it at. There's a period of time where you could have sold it at above 15%, so I wrote 10%, which is when I would have sold it at. Magnolia Gas and the Marathon Oil Corporation also wildly depend on when you bought it in the week. If you had bought it as I had perfectly instructed, there was a 6% gain to be made with Magnolia Gas and a 4% gain to be made with Marathon Oil Corporation. I, however, did not follow my own advice and suffered some of the consequences that you can see here on the screen from it. So the numbers up here are the numbers of the prices at which I bought everything at, leaving me with a 1% total return before the actual calculations. So here are the actual calculations of everything. So the real return is what I call when you add up all those percentages and divide it by 4. And that's the actual return if you were to break up your investments into 4 separate pieces that you would get from following these methods. So by following every single week, additional note, there's a little rule called compounding of interest. So you take that 4.38% number that you see there, and you multiply it by the other week's percentage. So you get 1.438 times 1.385, which gives us a return by the end of that second week of 8.83%. Following that with week 3 of 20 and week 4. And we have a total month return using my methods of investment of 20.61%. So for reference, in this month, the SPD 500 is down by 1.39%. However, you can also see these wild fluctuations that depending on when you bought in during this month, that percentage decrease could have been a lot greater. And I've highlighted there at the peak of its percent in growth. So basically, had you invested in your average portfolio, you would have seen a 1.5% loss. Whereas if you let me invest, you would have seen a almost 1% gain. So consider taking my advice. If you're feeling like taking a risk on a young person like me, maybe consider letting me manage your portfolio. I'm leaving my contact information at the bottom of this description if you're interested. Feel free to reach out to me at any time. And remember, it's okay to be confused, but keep learning.